I'll put the college.
We're recapping the college fantasy action from week 1 right after this. What's going on, everybody? Felix Sharp, Matt Bruning here. We had an incredible week 1 of college fantasy football action. We still technically have 2 games left with USC, LSU, and Florida State, Boston College Monday night. But there was so much that happened yesterday, Felix, and I had to get on here and just kind of recap everything that happened. We're going to kick it off with a very easy question, Felix. What were your overall thoughts of yesterday's games?
I think that from the college fantasy perspective, if you're going to win in traditional college fantasy or on the college side of your C2C leagues this year, it's going to be dependent on your running back room. You know, if you have 3 or 4 of those guys too that you can start at flex, and that's what's going to matter this year is if you have these guys who can get 100 and 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think you're going to want to put as many of those guys in your lineup as you can. I think that's obviously – that's intuitive. But guys like Jeremy Bernard, wide receivers that we thought we could count on to flexing, it's going to be the running back position that you need to have figured out.
Yeah, I think my reactions were maybe I got a little bit too bought into what happened on Thursday and Friday night because it felt like a lot of the guys that we wanted to count on throughout the college football season came through for us on Saturday, and including some really big performances from guys like Cam Ward, Texas Tech slot wide receiver Josh Kelly had a massive day. I mean, a lot of the players we expected to come through actually did come through compared to what we saw on Thursday and Friday.
Speaking of Cam Ward, if the draft was today, there's probably 10 GMs that would take him number 1 overall. Yeah. I mean, just based on how he played. I think it's Carson Beck there, but Cam Ward, he actually got better. Throwing the ball in that intermediate and deep range was a problem. He still likes to hold the ball a lot and do things that are unnecessary. But I think that if you polled all 32 GMs in the NFL, I think at least a third of those guys would say, yeah, we're going to take Cam Ward with the first pick, and the other 20 would probably say Carson Beck. So I think there's now maybe a remember, I mean, this quarterback class isn't particularly strong.
Yeah.
So while we have Carson Beck as the number 1 overall player, at least I do have the number 1 overall quarterback, I wouldn't be surprised at all if somebody like Cam Ward snuck up there and became the number 1 overall pick. By the way, what we're seeing at Miami, or what we saw at Miami yesterday in the Florida game, that is what we expected from him coming out of Incarnate Ward. I mean, we've been talking about this guy for 3 years now. We saw that ability was there. He just had some inconsistencies and some boneheaded turnovers at Washington State, but he really kicked it on in the second half of the year last year. Now he's on the most talented team that he's ever been on, and he's bringing some of those players to life. I mean, Xavier Restrepo already good. Sam Brown should have had a touchdown. Elijah Arroyo healthy now and playing. We'll probably see better games from Damian Martinez. I actually looked at the tickets to the U of L. I'm here in Louisville, and I'm going to that U of L Miami game. Both of those teams could be undefeated at that point, and that'd be a huge matchup. So, I mean, Cam Ward, if you talk about New York right now, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, I mean, those two are going to be right there at the end.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you brought up the other name there. It seems like, at least based on, as we do see a lot of people like to overreact, in my opinion, to week 1, the talk currently of the NFL draft community that I have seen is Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward locked in as 1 and 2 in the draft. And I think you would be remiss if you kind of overlooked what Carson Beck did. But since we've talked so much about Cam Ward, let's just go straight to that game. It was one of the more hyped games of this weekend. Miami does pull off the win 41-17 over Florida. You mentioned Cam Ward looked really good. 385 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, added 33 yards on the ground. Xavier Restrepo, incredible. Elijah Arroyo had a really good game as well. 4 catches for 89 yards, you mentioned. Restrepo, 112 yards on 7 catches for a touchdown. Wanted to mention that. And then Brown, just 3 for 19, but as you mentioned, should have had the touchdown catch. But I think the main concern, in a way, Damian Martinez, which Austin kind of talked a little bit about on the pregame show, the tailgate Saturday morning. Just 15 carries for 65 yards. Like, didn't do a ton in this one. Are you worried at all about him? We have him. He's a top 10 running back for us. We expect him to get decent draft capital. He's a guy we've liked going all the way back to his freshman year before he even actually committed to Oregon State. We've been big fans of him.
I'm not worried about Damian Martinez. I think they're going to keep slamming him back into the line of scrimmage, and he will have better games in playing against this Florida defense. So, no, I'm not worried. I mean, he's good enough at his 240-pound frame that he should still be productive this season for a coach that wants to run the ball and play defense. And Damian Martinez was brought in particularly for that. And by the way, Mark Fletcher played in this one. He got 7 carries. He only averaged 3.3 per carry. Damian Martinez averaged 4.3. So it's not like the running game was really going. Cam Ward is not known to really take off, even though you see him out there scrambling in the backfield. We know that he has the ability to run, but he's kind of like Bryce Young in that respect, where he has the ability to run but chooses not to. Yeah. If he's going to be getting first downs, here and there, or even run the ball more than the 3 times 33 yards that he did in this game, he just has a really high fantasy ceiling. It's funny how similar he is to Bryce Young in that respect. We all know that Bryce Young can be, probably a 500-600 yard rusher in the league, even in college if he wanted to. He just chose not to run. Cam Ward very much the same way, but so I'd be interested to see if he continues to develop that aspect of the game, or just choose, instead of holding the ball so long and doing all that flashy stuff, if you just take off sometimes and get some first downs, he could really get his team ahead of the chains more often than he does already.
Yeah, and with Damian Martinez, I'm glad you brought up the Mark Fletcher point, because I think that was one of the things that Austin highlighted, is that they're already talking about Mark Fletcher. We like Jordan Lyle as well, the true freshman running back. Mark Fletcher just a 7 carries, Jordan Lyle 6. So Martinez doubled them up on carries, and we did talk about it as well on the pregame show. Florida, the best part of that defense was that front line. So I would expect Damian Martinez to improve as well. Not much to talk about on the Florida side. Graham Mertz, I think, the most notable part, at least in my opinion, Graham Mertz unfortunately suffers a concussion toward the end of the game, and DJ Lagway comes in. Now, he did, for the most part, look like a true freshman, 11 for 20, just 91 yards, did have the interception, but I thought actually led the most impressive drive for Florida in that entire game, led down the field, gets them that touchdown, picks up a big, I think it was like a 3rd and 8, using his legs, looking like that rushing threat. We have talked about, not big fans of Billy Napier at all, since he came over from UL. Do you think we see DJ Lagway cemented in as a starter at some point in time this year, or do you think they just ride it out with Graham Mertz and then put Lagway in, in spurts? Obviously, this time was because of the injury.
I don't know that Mertz was the problem in this one. DJ Lagway, of course, brings a different element. I don't know that you're going to have a difference in the schedule that Florida has just because you have DJ Lagway. The fact of the matter is he's playing for last year head coach Billy Napier, and Florida just has an extremely difficult schedule. And by the way, I mean, I know that Florida recruits well, but they just weren't as talented as Miami was yesterday. So maybe that staff isn't developing the talent that they actually bring in. So, could he start in week 3, week 4? Yeah, I could absolutely see it. I mean, does it matter? No, because DJ Lagway is not going to be on this team next year. I mean, DJ Lagway is going to be somewhere else next year, because I think he's going to want to pick, who is developing him. I don't think he's going to just allow the Florida AD to have that big of a deciding factor in his future. He's going to want to pick, his who's going to develop him. So that's the sad thing about DJ Lagway, is that we just don't know where he's going to be next year.
Yeah, and I do want to mention, throughout the entire offseason, we were told Montrell Johnson likely not going to be ready for this game. We did mention on the tailgate that he was listed as a starter, does have a fairly good game, 11 carries for 106 yards and a touchdown. And then Eugene Wilson, the guy we expect to be the wide receiver 1, just 7 for 50. Georgia beats up on Clemson. They win 34-3. Obviously, Carson Beck has a some would say just your average. an average Carson Beck game, I guess as I'll put it, just goes out there, throws for almost 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interception, just, doesn't really seem – he actually, I would say, did seem like he was struggling a little bit in about the first half, but really, like, as things started going into the second quarter, they really started to pick it up. The biggest takeaway from me, though, on the Georgia side was true freshman running back Nate Frazier. Went 11 for 83 and a touchdown, had 1 catch for 24 yards. We know Roderick Robinson out with the knee injury. Branson Robinson didn't get much run in this one. Now we know Etienne should be back next week. He was suspended this week due to the off-field issues earlier in the offseason. Any other takeaways from this except Carson Beck just did Carson Beck things?
No, I mean, Georgia really picked it up on the run game in the second half here, and they kind of pulled away. Nate Frazier looked like a guy who could run between the tackles and play the physical game, where he was kind of billed as more of a scat back. So I didn't realize he had gotten up to 210 or whatever it is. So he's got an exciting future ahead of him. And Branson Robinson didn't look terrible. Coming back from the injury, I think that running back room is relatively deep once you consider Roderick Robinson, once he's healthy, and Branson Robinson and Trevor Etienne and Nate Frazier. I mean, if they want to do what Michigan did last year in the second half of that Penn State game, like, they can win games that way. Obviously, they don't have to because Carson Beck is the player that he is. But no, Georgia looked like one of the 2 best teams in the country, which is exactly what we thought they were coming into this game. I said on Wednesday, I said, Georgia is a terrible team for Clemson to be facing in week 1, given that Clemson is really trying to get back, and we knew it was going to be hard for them to get back against this Georgia team. So, there are – even London Humphrey scored the long touchdown and looked explosive on that play. So, Georgia has so many different options. London Humphreys can do everything. Arian Smith has speed. Colby Young is a back shoulder nightmare. Ben Urasek and Lawson Lucky, those guys are going to have their game. I'm sorry, and Oscar Delp, by the way, is going to have his game. We mentioned all the options in the backfield. And then, by the way, Dylan Bell, you can line him up at backfield if you want to, or throw it out to him on a screen. He's more that physical Swiss Army knife type player. So, Georgia is built to beat you in a bunch of different type of ways. From a fantasy perspective, I don't know that I'm starting any of the pieces on the outside. I honestly don't know if I'm starting any of the running backs just yet, because they're going to split from a committee. And quite frankly, you've got better options at quarterback because Carson Beck doesn't run. So as good as Georgia is, I don't know that there's a single player that you are starting, like, no matter what, every single week.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they get Etienne back next week, who will probably be the one that you're starting moving forward. But even then, like, I want to see what that rotation looks like. Because do they just put Nate Frazier back on the bench after? In my opinion, he looked like the best running back. I know Branson Robinson had like 1 good run, but he kept getting stopped in the backfield. He only averaged 1.7 yards a rush. Like, he just, for some reason, couldn't get it going. And Nate Frazier kind of brought that in. Now, he did do a lot of his, if I'm remembering correctly, more in that second half. But still, like, in my opinion, he looked like the better rusher. Do they put him back? Because I feel like Etienne and Branson Robinson do a lot of the same stuff. So will they just kind of rotate those 2? So Etienne's probably going to be a starter, or at least fantasy-worthy starter. But as of right now, I'm probably with you. I'm not starting him right now. I don't want to touch much on Clemson at the moment because we're going to talk about them here in a second. But I do want to talk about the positive side. Antonio Williams. I mentioned that, Austin's been a big fan of his for years, dealt with injuries, really just couldn't get it going last year after a really good freshman season, made an incredible catch in this one on the sideline, 6 for 76, obviously didn't get a touchdown. Was he the biggest part or the biggest bright light of Clemson, as the rest of that team really kind of just did not look good? And again, we'll discuss that here in a little bit. I would say so. I mean, they obviously gave. So I thought that David Ezio-Mume would get in this game, and he didn't. Phil Maffa carried the ball 16 times. The next leading carrier only carried it once. So it's definitely Phil Maffa or bust in that backfield. But no, I think Antonio Williams, if he's healthy, we kind of knew what he was from a skill position standpoint. I still don't know that you're starting him, but he's probably a player that we are looking forward to his jump to the next level. I think Mike comped him to Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't have a problem with that comp, but I don't know, man. I've Cade Klubnik, 18 for 29, 142 yards, 4.9 per attempt. Obviously, he's going in the ACC. He's going to have
easier matchups. But Cade Klubnik's never been that dude for me. He just never. I don't have him rostered anywhere. Didn't like him coming out. And I know that he won the Elite 11, and I think that he's still hanging his hat a little bit on his pedigree and the fact that he did that. But no, Cade Klubnik has never been a difference maker, in my opinion. And it's unfortunate because Clemson has a lot of good receiving options. Antonio Williams, Tyler Brown, Bryant Wesco, one of my favorite players in college football right now, TJ Moore. If they had another guy that could unlock these guys, more people would be excited about them. But I know that. So yes, Antonio Williams, the lone bright spot, but man, it's really starting to feel like Clemson is Michigan in some respects. Like if you have a skill position player going to that program, you really, really need to be careful because things have to break right for them to reach their ceiling, at least at the collegiate level. Yeah.
So the last game that we're going to talk about before we jump into talking about a panic meter and then some player discussions is the Notre Dame Texas A&M game that finished up last night. The other ranked matchup, one that everybody was talking about getting ready for week 1. And a lot of players in this that, we've talked about, from whether it's a Devi, campus to Canton, moving on to the NFL kind of discussion. Notre Dame ends up winning 23-13. Let's start with the bad side first. I mean, Connor Wigman, for those of you who believe, or follow the discussions that me and Austin have on him, did not look good. 12 for 30, 100 yards, no touchdowns, just two interceptions. But Le'Veon Moss did look fairly well. We were a little bit worried, obviously, with the injury to Reuben Owens. Would anybody able to step up in this in this running back room against a very good Notre Dame defense? He had 70 rush yards and the 1 touchdown. But again, something that was talked a lot about on the tailgate. I know for sure Nick mentioned this on why he wasn't going for Texas A&M. I know you took Notre Dame as well. The wide receiver room just has no one, and that really kind of bared itself out on Saturday night. Just Wigman again. Some of that was on Wigman. We cannot put this all in the wide receiver room, but there's just no one to throw the ball to. What are we doing? Is this just kind of kills every bit of fantasy value on this team outside of maybe Le'Veon Moss?
I don't think that I have any Texas A&M Aggies rostered anywhere and through like 10 leagues or so. I did like Le'Veon Moss coming out of high school. I kind of like the one-cut bruisers at the position, and I thought that he would, be the guy in the backfield with with Reuben Owens going down. So not really surprised about that. He had 20 carries. The next leading running back had 4. So I'd expect something like that to continue moving forward, even though E.J. Smith probably offers a little bit more in the passing game if you want to use him that way. By the way, I did not watch this game. I think it's funny to look at at Connor Wegman's stat line at 12 for 30, 100 yards, 2 interceptions, because you all keep telling me that Connor Wegman is that dude. And I say, well, just show me the plays where he is. I guess we won't be able to look at this Notre Dame tape to figure that one out, Matthew. So, yeah, I don't know. Not a lot of takeaways for me on the Texas A&M side because I already had all of them pretty low. And so I don't know. I don't know that much changed about how I feel. Noah Thomas, I think a lot of people thought Noah Thomas had a chance, but only just 1 catch in this one. And he's got a, kind of a outlier body type anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of this was on Wigman. If you get a chance to go back and watch him, he was just overthrowing wide receivers, throwing it just, whether it was miscommunication with the wide receivers or what was going on, you'd have wide receivers breaking into the middle of the field and he'd be throwing out routes off to the other side. No one near. It was just a bad game for Connor Wigman and the Texas A&M offense, to a point where Mike Elko was literally yelling at his offensive coordinator to run the effing ball so that they could get out of their down at 10 points. It was not great. Texas A&M did not look great. On the Notre Dame side of things, I think it's fair to say they did not look great either on offense. Riley Leonard, just 18 for 30, 158 yards, no touchdown, no interception. Did, though, pick up a bunch of big first down with his legs, 63 yards rushing. The major key point to me was Jeremiah Love, who I talked about on Tailgate. I thought he could be the guy. Now, Jadarian Price did have a big run as well, 44 yards and a touchdown on 8 carries, but Jeremiah Love got most of the carries, 14 for 91, the big touchdown at the end to give them, at that point, the 7-point lead. Moving over to the wide receivers, I mean, it's the same thing we just talked about Texas A&M. They actually have names in their room. Jaden Greathouse, Bo Collins. Nobody really did anything. But Bo Collins had a big catch that was, I believe they kept it as a catch, even though he caught the ball out of bounds, which was insane to me. But 5 for 62, the leading receiver on the day. I think it's fair to say outside of Jeremiah Love and then maybe Riley Leonard, we don't have any real fantasy options on this team either.
No, and I know people are excited about Jaden Greathouse. I had somebody reach out to me on Twitter about Greathouse. He's very much a tweener, kind of a tight end, kind of a slot wide receiver, kind of a receiver, an outside receiver. So, no, I don't think there is a player that we necessarily care about as other than the two freshman running backs and Williams and Keedron Young, who did not get a carry in this one. And then, if you want to take a shot with Love for his CFF production, maybe, it has a chance at the next level, and that's fine. I don't think we think Riley Leonard is an NFL player, and I don't know that there's anyone who's getting snaps at the receiver position that's a player at the next level either. I would be interested to see, because I don't see Mitchell Evans didn't have a catch in this game. Eli Rare didn't have a catch in this game. I would expect Notre Dame to be using their tight ends a little bit more often, but I don't see them on the box score. So not much to make here of the Golden Domers.
It was a really weird game. Like, if this is one of those things, Felix, if you're going back and I need to catch up on some of the games that I missed, you can probably just skip this one. As someone who watched the entire game, like, the last 5 drives for Notre Dame before they drove down the field and scored the Jeremiah Love touchdown, I believe they had, it was like 9 plays for 18 yards. Like, it was just not good. It was very much a defensive heavy game. Neither offenses could really get going here. It was not a overall fun watch until probably about the fourth quarter. Andrew asked in the chat, game script victims or concern on Bernard, Squirrel, Burden, or Blue. Well, guess what, Andrew? We're going to talk about that. We've got a little bit of a panic meter now. Burden and Blue are not on here, but if you'd like, I could add them to the list. We have a bunch of names that we are going to talk about after what happened this past weekend.
Jadon Blue won me some money this week, so I have no problems with him.
I think Jadon Blue was game script, if I'm being honest. I mean, I have Texas on here that we can talk about a little bit later, but I think that was more game script than anything else. So the first name that I want to bring up is Evan Stewart. Obviously,
so we're calling this the panic meter, right?
Yeah,
panic meter.
1 out of 5. Let's go 1 to 5, not 1 to 10.
Yeah.
All right. So go ahead.
Evan Stewart, we know that when he transferred in to Oregon, that there was an established guy there already in Tez Johnson. By the way, Tez Johnson also plays closer to the football in playing the slot position, and he already had that spot locked up. So when we were talking about who is it going to be, Tez Johnson or Evan Stewart, I always thought it was going to be Tez Johnson, even though Evan Stewart is probably the guy that has the higher ceiling, the more physical talent. What's my panic meter on him? I would say a 1 or a 2, because I think, okay, he had 1 catch in this one. I think the next game out, they might force feed him the ball. But if he doesn't get 5, 6, 7 receptions the next game, then I would probably be worried, because Oregon doesn't need to force the ball to Evan Stewart to win. They really, really don't. So I'd say 1 or 2 at least after week 1.
Yeah, I'm at a 2 as well. I'm not too worried about it. The 3 catches for 15 yards. It was a weird game, too. Even though Dylan Gabriel was actually playing fairly well going into the fourth quarter, this was a 7-point game going into the fourth quarter with Idaho. It's just a weird game overall. I'm not too worried about it. Terrence Ferguson.
A lot of these Power 5 teams got off to slower starts. Yeah. Colorado did, Michigan did, Oregon did. Like, a lot of these teams had. Texas was slow to start.
Oh, so was Ohio State. Yeah, there was a lot of those teams. Yeah. So I'm not really super worried about. Like I said, Terrence Ferguson 7 catches in this one. Kenyon Sadiq, Jordan James, Trayshawn Holden, Noah Whittington. Like, the running backs got more catches than Evan Stewart. I don't think that continues. I do think that Evan Stewart eventually comes up, but maybe it does lean into something that Austin has been talking a lot about on Campus Life. We have talked about both those guys possibly being top 15 fantasy wide receivers, because this offense produced 2 of them last year in Troy Franklin and Tez Johnson. But we thought, at least some of us, myself in that group, thought Evan Stewart could be that one and Tez Johnson be the 2. Maybe we should have stuck with Tez Johnson will be the top one, and then Evan Stewart finds a way to sneak into that top 15, top 20, because they just seem to have it. But I'm with you. I'm not really worried about him. I'd say a 2 at best.
Let me say it this way. From will Evan Stewart command high draft capital? I am not worried. From a college fantasy perspective, there are probably wide receivers that I know are the primary option in their offense as opposed to the number 2 that I would start over Evan Stewart. And then if you're talking about flexes, I probably want to get as many running backs in those flexes as possible. So from a CFF perspective, pure traditional CFF perspective, Evan Stewart probably falling a little bit in my rankings, because I don't know how confident I can be in Stewart from week to week, given that he's probably not the primary option in that offense, but we still expect that offense to, score a lot of points. So that's what I'm saying.
Moving over to Michigan on the panic meter, I want to just give a quick shout out to Colson Loveland, who had a great game. The starter, Davis Warren at quarterback, is helping him out. 8 catches for 87 yards and a touchdown. But in that means Alex Orji was not the starter. And I think it's fair to say, I don't know if you saw the free passes that he had. They were not great. But it looks like they're going to roll with former walk-on Davis Warren over Alex Orji. What is your panic meter on Alex Orji?
10. If we're going up to 5, it would be 10. They should go get Joey Liebes from Central Michigan and plug him in as the starter for Michigan. This Michigan offense is going to be really boring this year if Alex Orji is not in there and they're doing a whole bunch of plus run game, quarterback run stuff, and it doesn't sound like they're going to. Davis Warren won this job. He averaged 4.7 per attempt. 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 15 for 25. Ooh, yuck. I tell you what, I mean, this is against Fresno State too. They're really going to have to play defense and muck it up against teams if they're going to win. But you would expect more from if Alex Orji's not going to pass, if Davis Warren is going to be the guy, you would expect them to have 250 yards rushing. And, they didn't do that either, only averaged 4.4 per attempt. So this Michigan team is in trouble offensively. Alex Orji has a little bit of that Kyron Drones to him. Maybe he can get his feet wet and feel more comfortable as a passer and develop into the starter. But I got to go back and watch this game and see how he looked on his 2 attempts. You're telling me that he looked bad on 2 attempts.
Yeah,
then it's gonna be a problem. But this Michigan team can probably still win if they just put Alex Orji in the backfield and just run dive, run quarterback dive. Have everybody blocked up on the other side, and you can just win with plus numbers. So because it's not going to be Donovan Edwards, I tell you what, it's not going to be Donovan Edwards running physically behind this line of scrimmage.
Yeah. I mean, we'll get to Edwards here in a second. The one that's really sticking out in my mind, and I want to say it was in the third quarter, Alex Orji flushed out of the pocket to the right, could have taken off if he wanted to, but had a wide open wide receiver, and I mean, just dirted the ball. And he was maybe 7 yards away from Orji. It was really, really bad. Did not look good. But again, and I'll be honest, I didn't have all eyes on this game. I was paying more attention to the Texas A&M Notre Dame game. So it's a game I need to go back and fully watch. But from when I was watching that part, it didn't look like Davis Warren was that impressive either. You mentioned Donovan Edwards. I mean, cover of college football 25, best running back in the game. So we were told, gets 11 carries for 27 yards. Khalil Mullings, though, a lot of people here at Camps to Canton were telling you that's the guy to roster. 15 carries for 92 yards. Definitely, at least in my opinion, from what I saw, look like the better running back. What is your panic meter on? Panic meter on Donovan Edwards, and I forgot to mention, I am also a 5-10 on Alex Orji. It's just not great. Not great that he got beat out by Davis Warren.
On Donovan Edwards, I'm a 5. I never thought that Donovan Edwards was the running back that Michigan was trying to make him out to be. 6'2", 205-pound guy who wasn't. I mean, he was more of an athlete than he was a running back at West Bloomfield High School. And they're not using him as an athlete. They're not using him as a wide receiver, even though he's built that way. Those 2 Ohio State games, the one 2 years ago in the horseshoe where he ran for whatever he ran for, it's not like he was bouncing off of tacklers. These were wide open holes, and there was nobody at the second level to catch him. So, Donovan Edwards isn't like Blake Corum as a running back. He's more of Theo Riddick or somebody who you want to use primarily in the pass game. To the extent Michigan is going to keep running him into the back of the line, he's not that guy. So I think that Khalil Mullings, a former linebacker, probably fits that mold similar to, Hassan Haskins, Blake Corum than Donovan Edwards does. You look at Donovan Edwards, you look at his pedigree, you look at his size, you look at his athleticism, you say, oh, he should be this type of player, but he isn't. He never has been. He's never has been. He's had 2 games where he's, broke off some big runs because they were gaping holes. Donovan Edwards is a 5 on the list because if I am Sharon Moore, enough with this Donovan Edwards stuff. We're giving it to Khalil Mullins, and we're going to run dive and all that stuff and have pulling guards and play this smash mouth football that Michigan wants to play to win.
Yeah, I'm unfortunately with you as well. I mean, he's a guy that most of us at the company have been fading, telling you to fade over the past couple years, and it looks like that's going to happen. The only thing, if you want like a sliver of hope, Michigan fans, is again, I did not watch all of this game. Maybe a lot of this was just very limited gameplay because they didn't want to put anything on tape for Texas coming up to the Big House next week. That's the only positive thing I could take out of this right now because it just was not good. I mean, again, 30, it was, I don't remember what the final score was, but it was a very close game going into the fourth quarter. And a lot of that was because they were just allowing Fresno State to stay in that game. It was not pretty. Clemson. I mean, we talked a little bit about the positives earlier. What is your panic meter on just the entire Clemson team organization moving forward?
I mean, we talked a little bit about this earlier in going over that game. I mean, Clemson, despite bringing in players that we care about from a fantasy perspective, Bryant Wesco, David Eziomume, TJ Moore, there's something about that program that reminds me a lot of Michigan, and where those players kind of get stuck there and they are not developed. I mean, think about Will Shipley. Will Shipley, 5-star running back. He had decent success, but his comparison was Christian McCaffrey coming in, and I don't know that he had Christian McCaffrey level production. So they brought in Garrett Riley last year. That was supposed to solve it. It doesn't seem that it has. Maybe it's a Cade Klubnik thing, but it's definitely not. There's not an option behind Cade. We don't believe in Christopher Vinza or Vinza. How do you say it?
Vizina, I believe.
Vizina. We don't believe in him either. So it's going to take some time for this Clemson team to make the most out of the players that they're bringing in. Wesco, Moore, Eziomume, those guys. My panic meter on that is, I don't know. I guess we'll find out this year because Antonio Williams is probably going to leave. Let's see if he gets second, third round draft capital. If it's like fifth, sixth round, then you should be worried for Bryant Wesco, TJ Moore, and those guys.
Yeah. I'm going to be a little bit facetious and say a 1 because Chris Moxley and myself have been telling you for years to fade this entire Clemson program. And I think that it's just kind of showing you this is exactly who Dabo is. If he doesn't have Trevor Lawrence or Deshaun Watson, it's just not good. And we've tried to tell you guys, or at least I've tried to tell you guys for years that Cade Klubnik was not that guy. And they're not recruiting that guy either. And Bud Elliott from Cover 3 said this on Twitter, and I 100% agree with him because there are a lot of people going after Dabo, and the reason they lost this game is because of the transfer portal. That's not, I don't believe, the case either. Even if they would have hit the transfer portal, I don't think that they would have beat Georgia on Saturday. But I do think that is, again, continuing to show that Dabo is just out of touch with reality as a head coach of a program like Clemson, and it's going to be their downfall. So it's a 1 for me because I've already thought they were bad. Moving over to the Ohio State running back room. Now, we've talked a little bit about this. We weren't sure how it was going to look, and I get they were playing Akron, but for those of you who did not watch the game, they didn't pull their starters until late into the third quarter. Travion Henderson, just 8 carries for 65 yards. Quinshawn, 13 for 55. But they did also give true freshman James Peoples, who did only get 3 of these 6 carries in the fourth quarter, 6 for 30 and a touchdown. What is your panic meter on Henderson and Quinshawn, who, again, a lot of people have ranked as like they're at least both in the top 10 at the running back position, but like neither one of those guys brought home fantasy points to help you win a week this week.
No, and I thought that Ohio State would look very much like Oregon State did this week, where both of their running backs went over 150 yards. I thought we would be saying that about the 2 guys in Columbus. Those guys are talented players, and as long as they're healthy, I'm not panicking too much. I would say, I don't know, a 2 or so, but I thought that they brought in Chip Kelly so that they could run the ball more physically and more efficiently. That obviously didn't happen in week 1. They can still get better as the season goes on. Those are 2 dangerous guys from a schematic standpoint. You got to account for them on every single play. So I was, a little bit confused in looking at this box score and how long it took Ohio State to kind of pull away here, but not panicking just yet. Give me a 1 or a 2 on those 2.
I'm going to say a 3 because when I watched this game, you know what I thought of? Man, this looks a lot like Ryan Day's offense. That's why. So we'll move on to the next one here. Gavin Sawchuk. I've been a big fan of Gavin Sawchuk for years now. If you go back over to that Oklahoma game, everybody expected him to kind of be the lead running back for Oklahoma. They had a very good game on Friday night, beating Temple 51-3, and he was not the leading carrier for them. He only had six carries for 15 yards, just 2.5 average. True freshman Taylor Tatum looked better than him. Sam Franklin, Javante Barnes. What is your panic meter on Gavin Sawchuk?
It was definitely Sawchuk early before Barnes started coming in to relieve him just a bit. So, I would say a 2 on this one also. I don't know why Oklahoma couldn't get the running game going early on. It really couldn't. But Sawchuk is a player that you probably want to move around anyway, more of a speed back. By the way, Javante Barnes looked a lot better, more physical than I expected him to look, given how much hate Javante Barnes gets around here. So, I would say a 2 or a 3, but Sawchuk, like Edwards, is not the running back that you just want to run into the back of your offensive line. You want to get him in space. You want to use him on screens, speed stuff like tosses or outside zone. That's how I perceive Gavin Sawchuk, and maybe he just needs a little bit of time to get going. By the way, he started off the year slowly last year too, and then once injuries piled up and he became the guy, he was better down the stretch. So maybe we see the same thing this year with Gavin Sawchuk.
Yeah, I'll say a 2 or 3 as well. I still think he's a very explosive player. I've said from the beginning as well that I don't think he's the guy you give the rock to 20 times. He is definitely a guy that you put into certain situations. I still think that he can be the guy for them. Andrew asked earlier, again, game script or panic. I did add him to the panic meter before this. Squirrel White. Tennessee had a great game against Chattanooga, but Squirrel White was not one of those guys who did much of anything. He had what was it? I was trying to find it. It just disappeared on me. 2 catches for 22 yards. He now was in a list of people. Nathan Leacock, Holden Stales, Dayton Sneed, Trey Wee, Caleb Webb, Ethan Davis. All those guys had 2. Dylan Sampson, 3. It was Dante Thornton and Brew McCoy who really kind of led the receiving room in this one for Nico. Are you panicked on him? You think it was just game script? What are your thoughts on Squirrel White?
Man, I want to look at the snap counts from this one because Squirrel White was a guy that had, I think, more than 100 targets last year with Joe Milton at the helm. I thought that the number one beneficiary of Nico Iamaleava being there for Tennessee this year would be Squirrel White. So weird. So I'm like, and I saw all these other players catching the ball. I'm like, is Squirrel White even out there? What's going on here? So I am not panicking just yet. This was a guy that I had flexed in a league, and I'm like, I could have started a running back here and got myself a little more guaranteed production. So these wide receivers can be streaky and can be weird. Squirrel White was this way last year. Where he wasn't, producing in and out every single week. So, give me a 2 on the Squirrel White panic meter. I think that wide receiver room is definitely deeper than I thought it was. It wasn't just Horton. Who's the guy who had the 2 touchdowns? I can't even remember all his names. Brad McCoy? No, not Brew McCoy. Not Brew McCoy. It was,
who had Dante Thornton? Let me see. Who had the game?
Was
it 2 touchdowns?
Thornton?
It was Dante Thornton. Yeah, Dante Thornton had the 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I don't think that anybody was talking about Thornton
coming
into the season as being, a legitimate weapon there for Tennessee. The talk had been about Brazel. The talk had been about White. So, it could just be a weird thing. They threw the ball enough that Squirrel White should have been productive. He just wasn't. But coaches also tend to lean on the guys that they trust down the stretch. You can get away with throwing to somebody else and have other players in your lineup when you're playing an FCS team. So let's see if Squirrel White is more productive once we get into conference play, once the season goes on. I would say my panic level is probably like a 1, even though if I've got 2 or 3 wide receiver spots and I've got other options, I'm probably starting, some other wide receivers over him, and I'm probably flexing running back. So, but still panic level, just like 1.
Yeah, I'll say a 2. It looked like one of those games where they were just firing on all cylinders and just wasn't going to him. I don't know. I wouldn't even say it was game script like Andrew asked earlier. I think it was just he just wasn't getting the ball. And at that point, they got up so quick, like it just kind of didn't matter. But I am a little bit concerned just because he had a good year last year. If I remember correctly, he had like over 700 yards receiving, but only had the 2 touchdowns last year. And I'm just wondering if Nico's going to keep trying to hit these big, deep plays. And that's not really Squirrel White's game. So, like, that's kind of what I'm worried about.
It absolutely can be his game. That can,
it can be,
absolutely be Squirrel White's game.
Yeah, but they just haven't used it. I don't know. I'm going to say a 2, but I am leaning more toward a 3 right now because, like, I'm just not sure what to think about that real quick. Last one that I have on the list that I did, but I do want to get to the other 2 on. Well, we talked about Blue, so we'll talk Burden here in a minute for Andrew. Lenora Sellers. Went up against an Old Dominion team, not that good, 10 for 23, 114 yards passing, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Did, though, have 68 yards on the ground and 1 touchdown. Now, he did have a great pass to, I believe it was, I forgot who the wide receiver was.
Brown who dropped it.
Yeah, dropped it. It was like right. It literally hit him in the hand. So he would have had probably close to 200 yards passing and a touchdown, but just didn't look fully, I wouldn't say ready, but just look like a first-time starter.
Let me say this about this game plan. I was so confused as to what was going on because I feel like in the first quarter or maybe into the second quarter, he had only thrown the ball like two times. They were doing a lot of dive and read option stuff, and that offense just looked old, simple, very simple, nothing innovative about it. And when you have a player like Lenora Sellers, you would think that there would be some stuff like that, getting him on the move, moving the pocket, that sort of thing. It just wasn't. It was a very conservative game plan. So, I had him as quarterback 3 or so, thinking that this is going to be the breakout year. If this is going to be the game plan that they call for him, I don't think that you can absolutely expect that. Now, with 22 carries, that really presents a really high floor from a fantasy perspective. If he can get it going as a passer, we're talking about, him having some 30-plus point games when you're getting that many carries on the ground. So, but, I think that this offense is probably disappointing on the outside. There's not really a guy. Remember, they had Antoine Wells last year and the boy who was drafted by the Panthers, who can't, I forget his name. They don't have a guy like that on the outside, and it damn sure isn't your boy Nick Harbor. So that would be a concern. But I think that the talent level for Lenora Sellers should be enough to elevate the guys around him, even if they aren't that talented. But I was watching this one, and I was like, well, this is a super boring game plan. What's going on here? It's like they were just trying to run the ball down Old Dominion's throats to get out of there to make it quick, and they just weren't good enough to actually do that. Oh, Rocket Sanders, by the way. That's another player that we should have a problem with because he did not look good, didn't break off chunk runs, and they kept giving him the ball. He was not making the most of his touches, so I'd be worried about Rocket Sanders too.
Xavier Leggett was the wide receiver you were looking for. Yeah, I would say a 2. I mean, again, we've not really seen Sellers ever start a game. There were a lot of teams that we talked about throughout the past couple days. It just like these teams were taking a little bit of time to get going and everything, so I'm not going to be super worried about it. I was not paying a lot of attention to the South Carolina Old Dominion game, so I'm going to trust Felix when he says that they were just kind of bad game plan or boring game plan. And we'll see what he looks like in week 2. Then Andrew asked about Luther Burden. So he only had the one carry for 10 yards and 3 catches for 39 yards and a touchdown. I'm not really worried about him. I did watch a lot of this game against Murray State. I think it was on Thursday or Friday, and I can't remember which one. I think it was Friday night. To me, it was just they were hitting a lot of big explosive plays, and then the defense was kind of keeping them, giving them short fields. Like, I'm not super worried about Burden. I'd say probably a 2 on Luther Burden. I'm not worried about him really at all. They seem to still be trying to get him the ball out. And I mean, the leading receiver on the team was Daniel Blood with 5 catches. So he had 2 more than Luther Burden. Like, it was just not the score would indicate it was a big offensive day, 51-0. It was not. Like, a lot of that was very short fields. Defense did their job.
Yeah, I'm not worried about Luther Burden either, just given – I mean, he's a focal point of their offense and will continue to be. So, I just no issue there. All
right, so I have a couple teams and just players that I wanted to talk about. We can run through these as quick as possible.
Yeah, we're talking about Drew Aller.
Penn State's trio, but we can just talk about Drew Aller if you want. Drew Aller had the big day. Nicholas Singleton looked back, 114 yards and a touchdown. And then Harrison Wallace, 5 for 117 and 2.
Yeah, Harrison Wallace, he caught 1 touchdown in the slot, and then he had one touchdown lining up outside and catching the fade. So I think that was Wallace that caught the fade there at the end. Listen,
Yes,
Drew, I've said this before. Drew Aller is one of the most physically gifted people playing quarterback in football, not college football, in football period. Like, I think that Drew Aller is more physically talented than Tua Tagovailoa, Brock Purdy. I mean, there's a lot of players like that. He just hasn't gotten comfortable. He looked comfortable as hell yesterday, and I did go back and actually watch this one. When you talk about the ability to throw the opposite hash comfortably and throw outside the numbers to players breaking on out routes and stuff, Drew Aller has all of that. Plus, he has plus mobility for that size. I was surprised that he looked as good as a passer as he did in week 1 against West Virginia, because I thought he looked terrible in the spring game and I just wrote them off. Now, I don't know if Harrison Wallace or Trey Wallace is going to be this dude every single week. I really don't. Did Julian Fleming even play in this game?
I didn't see. I was watching a lot of this until it went to the delay, and then I did not really watch the second half. But yeah, I'll look it up. I don't remember seeing much of anything from him in the first half, to be honest.
No, but I mean, if you're going to be an elite quarterback, you should be. You don't necessarily need to have a guy out there. You should be making your teammates better, and Drew Aller absolutely did. He's a player that you can call any play that you want to. It's just Drew Aller can make it. He really can. And there aren't, like, Michael Penix Jr. was one of those guys. And when I say any play, I'm usually talking about the opposite hash stuff, the throws that go outside the number, the low trajectory throws, and he can make those. And we saw quite a few of them yesterday. Maybe I had been dropping Drew Aller in anticipation of him having like a DJU like crash, but it didn't start that way in week 1.
Yeah, I mean, he looked incredible, and I wonder how much of that delay, because it was a couple hours delay after halftime, kind of put a little bit of stop to that offense, because they didn't look like the same team that came back out. But yeah, I thought Aller looked incredible. There was a couple big plays in the second quarter that he picked up with his legs to keep the drive going, which is what we wanted to see from him. I thought as a passer, he looked really good. So I'm excited to see what he continues to do moving forward. So I put, are we worried about Kyron Drones? If you look at the stats tell you that he was fine, at least from a passing part. 22 of 33, 322 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, just 19 yards on the ground. But a lot of that came in the fourth quarter and then overtime when they still ended up losing to Vanderbilt. He looked, at least in my opinion, really bad throughout the first 2 and probably half of the third quarter. Again, is it just a first game of the season? You're playing a good Vanderbilt team that usually is at least fairly disciplined.
Yeah, I went and watched this game because I obviously wanted to see how he looked. And there was one drive where he hit a defender in the hands, like on back-to-back throws. And that's not something that I see from Kyron Drones all the time. They were ready for the quarterback who plays like a fullback sometimes, that quarterback dive stuff that he was getting last year. Vanderbilt was stuffing that stuff really, really good. So, I think that Drones is a player that he has to get going in the running game for him to be able to pass and keep the chains moving. And he was not able to get it going on the running game. So he really had to be used as a passer. I think he'll have better days than he had yesterday versus Vanderbilt. But it was interesting to me that Vanderbilt was able to stop Virginia Tech up front. That's not something that I expected. So, but Drones has to get going on the ground first before he can get going through the air.
I do want to address Michael's question real quick here. So what about Cameron, which, by the way, it is Scattaboo, not Scatabo, which I did not know. I just finished watching the Arizona State game earlier. I watched half of it last night. Or Josh Meredith with Washington State. Both are fine, higher scoring options on my waiver wire. They have an unlimited waiver league. Man, I don't know I am someone who tends to hold a little bit longer just because I want to see it is week 1. But Josh Meredith didn't register a catch in that Washington State game.
I was just looking like Josh Meredith.
He did nothing. Scattaboo because again, I just finished watching that game. I think a lot of that was more just game script. I mean, they literally had 2 touchdowns they had 2 pick sixes in the first 10 minutes of that game Arizona State did against Wyoming. So, like, there wasn't a lot for the offense to do anything. I know DeCarlos Brooks, I think, is the backup running back, got the touchdown. In my opinion, Scatterbo looked like the better player, but the offense was just kind of off kilter. They didn't have to do much. I actually thought Sam Levitt looked really good. He made a couple big throws, but Scatterbo, in my opinion, looked like the better running back. I would not panic on him just yet. We've seen Dillingham does a good job with those running backs. I think, again, it was just they didn't have to do much against this Wyoming team, so I wouldn't pay too much. Meredith, I would not blame you if you dropped him. But again, we really thought he was going to be the guy, but it's hard to say because he, like I said, I don't remember who the two wide receivers. I know one, I think, was Carlos, or was it Kyle Williams, I think, was the one who went off.
Kyle, 141 yards, touchdown, I think.
Yeah, it was, and there was another guy that went off too. And like I said, I was actually surprised because I did not watch this game. I haven't yet, Michael, so I don't want to say why I don't remember Josh Meredith having any reports of him being injured or anything. So I really don't know what to think because we thought he was going to be as Chris Hudson. So Kyle Williams and Chris Hudson both had 4 catches for over 100 yards and a couple touchdowns.
But by the way, and I put this in the waiver wire column, Wayshawn Parker is a player that they really, really liked coming out of camp. And he led the team in carries. He only had 8 carries. But if Washington State is going to play this Mountain West schedule, I said this on Campus Canton Live, or on the pregame show, I think that there's a chance that whether or not you win your league this year is dependent on how many Washington State Cougars you have, because this is a Power 5 roster going down to play a G5 schedule. So Wayshawn Parker, Kyle Williams, John Mateer might be all players that leads you to, your college fantasy championship this year. So I would take a look at Parker also. Now, Washington State, a team that doesn't want to run that much, but to have the RB1 on a team that might be scoring 45 points a game, I don't think that that's ever a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, just the 8 carries, 96-yard touchdown. He also did have a catch for 52 yards that he took to the house for a touchdown as well. So he's an explosive player, might be a guy that you want to look at. So the next one, you talked a lot. I'll give you credit for this. You've talked a lot about this. I know some on the best ball drafts that you did with Chris, but even throughout this offseason, talking about how you wanted Tyler Shuck in this offense. And now, again, doesn't sound like a massive stat line when you say he only had 232 yards passing and 4 touchdowns. But, I mean, whenever they got the ball, this Louisville offense looked really good. The more surprising thing to me, though, was Ja'Cory Brooks, 7 for 83 and a touchdown. Chris Bell only had the 1 catch, and I believe was only targeted 3 times. Like, it's just a weird game. What are your thoughts overall if you had a chance to watch this game? And is this the revival of Ja'Cory Brooks?
Maybe, yes. And Ja'Cory Brooks has always been a good possession wide receiver, in my opinion. You got to remember, Ja'Cory Brooks would be in the doghouse for Alabama, and then when they needed a big play, they would be like, all right, Bryce Young, get out there and throw the ball to Ja'Cory Brooks. It started really in the spring game where I was like, ooh, man, they're doing a lot of the equivalent of 5-step drop and throwing the ball deep for Louisville this year. And you look at Tyler Shuck's stat line, and he averaged almost 10 yards per attempt yesterday. So, you're going to have tougher tests than Austin Peay. But I don't know. I mean, it was really the confidence that I had after watching that spring game where I was like, this dude is going to be throwing the ball all over the place this year. And I still continue to believe that even without Colin Lacey there, you still got 2 really good options on the outside in both Bell and Brooks. And, oh, by the way, Mark Redmond, who's been in college football for a long time, he caught a touchdown for U of L yesterday. So, it's a Brian Brom team. It's a Brian Brom team. I think that they're going to throw the ball all over the place, and I want Tyler Shuck. I think I said it on Campus Canton Live on the things that we think we know about college football going into 2024. But now, Austin Peay, again, not the governor. Sorry, not going to really test you 62-0. But so far, so good for U of L, for the Cardinals.
Yeah, they look good. Like I said, if Shuck stays healthy, he could end up having a really good year. We talked already a little bit about Tennessee, so I don't want to mention much here. I do want to mention, because I know you and me, I feel like, have been a little bit on an island on this one. Dylan Sampson, 12 for 124 and 3, and then Cameron Seldon, the one that everybody just seems to keep holding on to, the running back, very athletic, incredible athlete. His comps in our database are ridiculous, but third on the
Dylan Sampson. We knew it was going to be Dylan Sampson. I kept saying y'all are overrating Cam Seldon, because you'd see Cam Seldon go in like the 4th round of startups, and Dylan Sampson would go in like the 7th. And obviously, he's the lead guy for Tennessee. When that had been telegraphed for months, by the way, that had been telegraphed for months. So I don't know. You were going to ask a question, but I think if you've got Dylan Sampson on your roster, that was one of those mid-round to late-round startup picks, or even he was probably available in freshman drafts. You could have picked him up. You're going to get a lot of equity in that pick because Josh Heupel, he's thought of as this spread guy, but he wants to run the ball, and it looks like Dylan Sampson is going to be the primary guy for him.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I feel like I said you and me have been kind of on this. Cameron Seldon doesn't deserve to be as highly ranked as he needs to. So, yeah, I'm one of those things where I'm with you. I just wanted to bring that up. I mean, I want to talk about one more for sure. And do you? Well, I don't know, I'll just put this out loud. Do you want to go? I'm happy to finish doing these other eight. I want to talk about them. Do you want to do them or?
No, go ahead, and I'll be right back.
Okay. So I'll talk about Kyle McCord since I know you don't want to talk about Kyle McCord. So while Felix is gone, Kyle McCord is back, baby. 27 for 39, 354 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. Man, he looked like the guy that I thought he was going to be coming into college. And, obviously I thought Ohio State was going to be able to get the best out of him. Never really seemed like he was comfortable there. I don't know if that was just trying to square peg, round hole into Ryan Day's offense, but Fran Brown, the head coach of Syracuse, just kind of let him do his thing, and I thought he looked really good. Again, they were going up against Ohio, but I put out on Twitter the stats. Nick does an incredible job with the stuff on the C2C winning edge, and Ohio actually has a much better defense compared to Akron, who Ohio State went up against. I know Brett mentioned earlier, Akron, good defense. They're not even as good as Ohio. Looked like Rodney Gadsden was back. He had 108 yards on 7 catches and a touchdown. But Trevor Pena had a really great catch in the back of the end zone, and it's one that, I think I'm going to tag Felix in the tweet of this throw on Twitter because he talks about these opposite hash throws all the time. And Kyle McCord on the opposite hash fires a dart to the left side of the end zone that only Pena could get to. It was right on the back shoulder, right over a defender as well for a big touchdown. It was a beautiful, beautiful throw. I was so happy to see Kyle McCord succeed like that at Syracuse. Now, again, it is just Ohio. They are going to have to go play some good ACC schools. And again, I don't know that he's ever going to be a massive fantasy asset for you, but just from a personal standpoint, it was great to see him back after all the kind of crap he got from Ohio State last year. Going over to Texas, I mean, Texas did it all against Colorado State, though we were kind of expecting that. Ewers, just 263 touchdowns. The 1 interception is a really bad interception, too. Arch Manning did come in, just had the 95 yards and a touchdown. But Andrew asked earlier, Jadon Blue, was that more game script or are we panicked on him? To me, it was more game script. I mean, he had 11 for 57 and 3 catches for 37 yards early on. But then that Texas team just started to run away with that, and there's just kind of no reason to have him there. So I'm not really worried about Blue. In my opinion, he looked the best. I do want to mention, though, because he did come in before Texas really started to run away with it, true freshman running back Jarrett Gibson. He had 10 carries for 67 yards and a touchdown. I've mentioned it before because of the injuries to that room. I thought that they might end up leaning on that true freshman a little bit more than we expected, kind of like they did with CJ Baxter last year. And in my opinion, Gibson looked good. Now, he's definitely not, I think, it's not unfair to say he's not quite the prospect I believe Baxter or Blue were, but still a very, very good guy. And I'm really looking forward to him kind of moving forward and what I'm going to do with him. On the wide receiver side of things, this is a discussion we need to have real quick, actually. So Isaiah Bond, 5 for 61 and a touchdown. Jonte Cook, 3 for 56 and no touchdowns. Matthew Golden, 3 for 50 and 2. Ryan Wingo, the true freshman, 4 for 70, and I believe 40 yards of that was with Quinn Ewers. The rest of that was with Art. So he was doing that with the ones. Silas Bolden, the guy that the Texas camp was telling us was going to be the guy, 1 catch for 5 yards. Should have just trusted our intuition on this one, guys. Matthew Golden is still really good. The guy going to be, I think, the guy there. Isaiah Bond was the guy that Quinn was going to more often than not. So I think that Isaiah Bond is going to be the main threat for this offense. They were using him in the short and intermediate areas. They tried to hit him on big plays or long plays a couple times as well. So I think it's going to be him. And to be honest with you, for me, Matthew Golden comes up next in that thing. And so, some people faded him because of the Silas Bolden talk. Some people didn't. Regardless of what happens now, Matthew Golden is a guy I think that you can roster. I don't know about starting just yet because, again, 3 for 50 and 2. Again, they didn't really need him that much, but he definitely looked like to be the second guy in that roster there going forward, or in the kind of the pecking order there for Quinn Ewers. I did want to touch on Dylan Raiola really quick. In my opinion, had a very impressive first start for Nebraska. 19 of 27 for 238 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. It wasn't a great game overall for Dylan Raiola. There were definitely moments that he looked like a true freshman. But there was a play where it was in the second quarter where the defense got up in his face. They broke through the line. The defensive lineman broke through the offensive line and came at him, and he scrambled out to the right and then did that off-platform sidearm throw. I believe it was to Jamal Banks for a big first down. This was on a third down, and like that right there is why we were excited about Dylan Raiola. It was, this guy can play right now. He's got stuff that makes you think he can be a first-round pick, and he didn't really make any bad throws. Now, again, I was kind of back and forth on a couple different games, and then they pulled, unfortunately, that game off to put the Penn State game back up on my quad box on YouTube TV. So, I haven't got a chance to go back and finish watching the third and fourth quarter, but from what I remember watching in the first and second quarter, I didn't see him put the ball in, bad spots at all. Was just a very clean game for a true freshman, which, again, is very impressive. I'm excited to see what he continues to do because I've said it before and I'll say it again. Nebraska has a realistic shot of being, I can't remember if it's 6 or 7-0 going into the shoe to play Ohio State. This could be a really big year for true freshman Dylan Raiola, and I'm excited to see what he ends up doing. I am a little bit worried about this backfield. Austin and myself have talked a lot about Dante Dowdell. Now, he did get a touchdown on this one on 8 carries for 55 yards, but it was Ramir Johnson who actually had most of the carries, 11 for 50, but they also got Emmett Johnson involved as well, 8 for 71. And this was a close game for most of it. So I don't know that this was just we're up a couple touchdowns on UTEP. Let's get these guys involved. No, they were using all three. Oh, and they used Gabe Ervin in the red zone. He had 6 for 24 and 2. So they were mixing this up between 4 running backs. And maybe it's just again, week 1, trying to get everybody involved. But I am a little bit worried. I thought Dante Dowdell could have a really good year this year for that Nebraska team. I'm a little bit worried that they got 4 guys involved and not one of them separated themselves. I am a little disappointed that Felix had to go because Isaiah Nayor, the guy he's been talking about for what feels like 8 years, a kid has been at least 3 since we've been with this network. He looked good in this game, guys. 6 for 121 and 1, had a great touchdown grab. Dylan Raiola missed him on one play. He would have had 2 touchdowns. It was in his hands. He led Isaiah Nayor a little bit more than he needed to, and Nayor dove for the ball, and it hit him going toward the goal line. I thought he was going to have a great diving catch for a touchdown. He ended up not being able to bring it in, but my goodness, that was an incredible game for Isaiah Nayor, and I wonder if he can stay healthy, he might be back. I thought Jamal Banks would be the guy for this team. Now, he had the 4 catches for 61 yards and a touchdown, but overall, I think Isaiah Nayor was the guy. Ashton Jeanty, Chris Moxley said could make it to New York. If this weekend's game is any case to that point, it's probably going to happen. 20 for 267 and 6. Again, 267 rushing yards and 6 touchdowns. Jeanty had himself a day. Felix brought this up earlier. Oregon State's backfield, Jam Griffin and Anthony Hakerson. We were kind of intrigued to see what this team would look like. They ran the ball a ton. Jam Griffin, 20 carries for 162 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then Anthony Hakerson, 24 carries for 155 yards and 2 touchdowns. Austin was talking a little bit about this on the pregame show, wanting to start Anthony Hakerson. He would have been right. So hopefully that guy listened and started Anthony Hakerson because 155 yards and 2 touchdowns. Obviously, again, they were playing Idaho State, so not anything to write home about, but it was at least interesting to see those 2 guys. They did not pass the ball much at all, so I really wonder if this is what their identity is going to be moving forward. We don't really know much about what this Oregon State team is going to be. Giovanni McCoy only had 9 pass attempts. They did bring Gabari Johnson in. Now he only had 4. So, and it was interesting, as I said, it sounded like they wanted to play both of them, even though McCoy was named the starter. I think Gabari Johnson's just a better player, but we'll see how this continues to shake out for Oregon State moving forward. They obviously get San Diego State, which I have not had a chance to watch that game. So I see it comes up it's playing on True TV on Monday. I'm going to record it because I wanted to watch Danny O'Neal. I've seen the stats and it looks like he had a really good game. I wanted to see him play, but obviously they get San Diego State next week and then Oregon. So They're going to have to kick it into gear. I don't know if they're going to be able to run it 44 times in a game. Actually, 58 times overall. They only passed 14 times, 58 runs in that game for Oregon State. Jalen Milroe and Ryan Williams. So Andrew did ask earlier in the chat as well, game script or panic meter on Jeremy Bernard. I am not panicked on Jeremy Bernard. I think it was game script. Jalen Milroe only passed the ball 9 times in that game for 200 yards, and 139 of those 200 went to true freshman Ryan Williams, who had just the 2 catches for 139 yards and 2 touchdowns. I'm just going to go ahead and break the news now. He is going to be Canton's freshman of the week. Incredible game. I'm not really worried about Bernard, just the 1 catch for 17 yards. It was a weird game. Alabama's offense pretty much was able to do whatever they wanted, and they didn't do much. Again, just 9 passes for Jalen Milroe. When I say much, they scored a lot of points, but not much really needed from a fantasy aspect. Justice Haynes, though, did look good. Just the 4 rushes for 102 yards and a touchdown. Really good. I just wonder if I don't know if this was Kalen DeBoer just wanting to get Ryan Williams, kind of like his first touches, get his feet wet first game, get him ready, because I do think that they're going to have to rely on him a lot moving forward. But my goodness, this could be a really interesting connection that could win you fantasy championships, because Jalen Milroe also had 2 touchdowns on the ground, 79 yards. If Ryan Williams is going to be the guy that he's looking to for these deep passes, if he can improve on that a little bit, is going to be a lot of fun. We had a fantasy bonanza last night with New Mexico versus Arizona. Again, a game I haven't had a chance to watch yet. I've definitely seen what Tetaroa McMillan did. Just absolutely incredible. 10 catches for 304 yards and 4 touchdowns. He will be one of our players of the week. But I want to touch on Noah Fafita. We were worried about what this offense would do. Would they go to more of a run game? They were passing a lot. Now, maybe that was because they had to. New Mexico was in this game for a decent amount of time, mostly due to their quarterback, Dan Pierre, who had a really good game again. 260 yards passing, 3 for 2 touchdown interception ratio, added 130 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. He might be a guy who wins you weeks at quarterback. If he's available, I would definitely go get him, but he's probably not, because I know guys like Felix have been talking about him. But I also wanted to touch on Quali Conley, the running back. There's a lot of talk about him, and I can't remember who the other running back is. I'll pull it up, who transferred in as well with them, about who is actually going to get the ball. And I mentioned Quali Conley on the Flag Plant show, because he transferred in with the new head coach, and I thought he could be the guy. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. So he did get more carries, a 13 for 106 for the touchdown. But Quali Conley, 10 for 90 and 3, and he also had 3 catches for 29 yards. Telling you, if Quali Conley is available on your waiver wire, I would go after him. They want to use him in the receiving game. You know, if they don't just want to go to Tetaroa McMillan, just to throw this out there again, they didn't really need to, because Tetaroa McMillan, it seemed like, scored every time he touched the ball. But Quali Conley was behind him in receptions. Now, again, it was only 3. Tetaroa McMillan had 10. But, like, we've talked a lot about this offense, like, who will be that second wide receiver? You know, will it be Montana Lamonius Craig? Will it be, Kenyon Burnett? Will it be Jeremiah Patterson? Like, who's going to be that guy? Maybe it's going to be running back Quali Conley, who, again, got 3. They threw the ball to him a ton last year at, I think it was San Jose State. And then I don't remember exactly where he was in his JUCO year or FCS, but in the FCS, he had over 200 catches, folks. 200 receptions in the FCS in 3 years. This is a very good receiving back. That's why I did my flag plant on him. Quali Conley, Arizona running back. If he's available, I would definitely go after him if you can. Last couple topics before we get out of here. Ohio State. I'm glad Felix isn't here, so I'm just going to have Ohio State all to myself. They won. Playing against an Akron team that I think is definitely probably better than it gets credit for, but not a great team overall. So Howard, 7 of 28, 228 yards, did have the 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 18 yards on the ground. I will say picked up a couple big third downs with his legs. So that was important. We already mentioned Travion Henderson and Quinshawn Judkins did not look impressive. I wanted to touch on the wide receivers, though, because I'd kind of said this, and I was joking in our company Slack about it, and everybody was like, you're making an argument nobody's talking about. But for those of you who are fans of the network and have been listening since January, I've been saying from then, Jeremiah Smith was going to be the wide receiver 2 on this team. Y'all needed to fade Carnell Tate. That, at least for one game, has come to bear fruit. Jeremiah Smith, 6 for 92 and 2. Mecca, 4 for 51. Now, he did not get a touchdown. Carnell Tate's touchdown came in the 4th quarter with Devin Brown in at quarterback. He was not doing anything with the ones in Howard, just 4 for 58 in the 1. Again, his touchdown did come, though. He did get a touchdown. Mecca didn't, but that came with Devin Brown. I am a little bit worried about this team. Now, in fairness, it does seem like over the past couple of years that game one in the Ryan Day era has just kind of been, I wouldn't say sloppy, but just not overly impressive or not what we expect. Then Ohio State tends to pick it up and kind of do really good moving forward. So maybe that's what this was, but I was not overly impressed with what I saw out of this team. Again, to me, it looked a lot like the Ryan Day offense of the past with all the passing of the ball. They did run the ball a decent amount. Let's see here. Actually, I'll pull it up because I want to make sure, because they do typically have like a close to 50-50 split in the neutral game script situations, and that is what it leads out to be. Ohio State 33 rushes, just 31 pass attempts between Will Howard. Devin Brown only had the 3. So I am very curious. Oh, I'm sorry. Cardinal Tate must have come with Will Howard. That must have been at the end of the third quarter. I do apologize. They don't have a tough schedule moving forward as of right now. Western Michigan, Marshall, then they go to Michigan State, Iowa, Oregon. So that'll kind of be like when Ohio State's offense really needs to turn it up. But I'll be watching those next couple of games to see if this offense looks any better. My biggest fear with this team, and I've talked about it before, was the offensive line. There was a lot of talk about it got improved through the transfer portal. Brett mentioned, Akron's defense was better. I don't think Akron's defense was that good, but their defensive line was getting through that offensive line fairly easily, and the run blocking was god-awful against Akron on Saturday. I mean, I don't know if it was more them or just Quinshawn Travion not having good games. If it was, you were asking me, I would say it was the run blocking. They did a decent job pass blocking, but run blocking was bad. They'll need to improve that when they go up against teams like Oregon, Iowa, Penn State, and Michigan. I actually don't know if Ohio State plays. They've got to play Penn State this year. They do. You're not going to be able to have that bad of a run blocking or just offensive line in general against those teams. So it's something I'm watching for. A lot of people have talked about Ohio State being one of those top 4 teams in the nation, but nobody picked Ohio State to win the national championship, at least out of like the college football pundits. And that's why I think a lot of people have realized that offensive line is just not good overall. So Michael Henry in the chat, I just want to say really quick, because he was asking this question. So who are your 3 must-have players for waivers for you all, and what percentage of budget would you put on them? Michael, what I would say is if you are a member of Campus to Canton, go to campustocanton.com. Felix Sharp and Jared Palmgren, our CFF lead, obviously Felix, co-founder here at the network, incredible mind as well. Both just actually dropped their waiver wire articles about 3 hours ago on waivers that you should pick up for CFF purposes and C2C purposes. I don't want to steal their thunder and read the article on here. I will say it is free if you are not a member. So even if you're not a member, please go to campstocanton.com. Check out both those articles. That will answer any questions you have, because I don't know if you want to go from a Campus to Canton perspective or from like a CFF perspective, or you're just trying to score those points. But both those guys put out articles so you can kind of get your opinion, what your best 3 options are for your leagues based on that. And I would say if you're not a member, definitely become one, because you can easily check with the roster management tool if any of those players are available in your leagues, because we pull from Fantrax. You can literally find out who's available for you. But I appreciate everybody who jumped into the show and commented. He also was talking about John Mateer. John Mateer did look good. Again, I will fully be honest, I've only watched the highlights, but from what I saw, it looked good. I think he had 2 rushing touchdowns as well. So Chris Moxley nailed that one with that's the guy to have. Thanks to Mox, I have him in a bunch of underdog drafts, so I'm very curious to see how those look. Unfortunately, I have Josh Meredith as my wide receiver in a lot of those, so that's not looking great. But I think we are going to try and do this every Saturday or Sunday throughout the season, just to kind of react to things. Obviously, we have the LSU-USC game coming up. We are going to put this on a podcast. So if you're listening on the podcast, this next part, because I just want to talk about that game really quick, is not going to matter for you, because chances are by the time you listen to this, game is going to be over with. But we will, again, try to just kind of do this every single Saturday night or Sunday to kind of give you guys our reactions before it gets into the network. Jared Palmgren dropping his stuff on Monday. So you'll have him, and he brings in all kinds of guests. Obviously, Chris Moxley, Nate Marquise, Justin Volume Pigs, all these guys coming in. They give you great reviews from a CFF side of things. So definitely check them out on Mondays. And obviously you'll have Colin and Austin dropping Campus Life on Tuesdays. We'll be live every Wednesday night with Campus to Canton Live. We'll probably do more of some quick reactions before looking forward to other stuff as well. But you'll get a ton of reactions as well. But if Felix can't do it, or if I can't do it, I'm sure one of us will do it every week, because it's just fun to react to this stuff. So USC LSU is going live here in about an hour my time. Cannot wait. USC ranked 23, LSU ranked 13. LSU is 4-point favorites. I'm very intrigued to watch this game because the over-under is at 67.5, and I think it could easily go over. Nate Marquise posted that, what was it, only 4 games went over the 100 mark this week. I don't remember who they were, and I don't want to go look the tweet up, but go look up Nate Marquise, and he'll have it on there. I think this could be the other one. This could be the 5th one. If both these defenses are similar to what they were last year, and I know that USC brought in the new defensive coordinator, and LSU had a lot of injuries last year, but I think there's a realistic shot that neither one of these defenses are at all improved. We'll see what Miller Moss looks like. Obviously, in the Holiday Bowl last year, had the 5 touchdowns, looked really good, but spring game did not. I'm not sold on Miller Moss. I don't think he's that good, but I do trust Lincoln Riley, even though I think he could end up on the hot seat this year and just not really, I think, being what he's billed out to be. I'll put it that way. He's a great schemer. I mean, sometimes you watch how easily he gets his wide receivers open is just ridiculous. So I don't want to take too much away from Lincoln Riley, but he is. And let me see here. Todd said, "No, Matt, I didn't start Hankerson, went with Tyree and Patterson, but still won." I'm glad that you won because you should. I don't remember who kicked back on Austin, but obviously, 150-2 for Hankerson was great. I would, in my opinion, again, I did not get a chance to watch a lot of the Oregon State game. Just have seen highlights so far. I haven't recorded. I will watch it. I thought he looked like the better running back from what I saw, but man, I mean, it looks like they're just going to run the ball. Hey, Todd says, got a little lucky. Hey, sometimes it's better to be lucky than not. I haven't looked at any of my scores yet because I know some of the players I didn't start that went off, and I'm just like, you idiot. Like, I really was kind of worried about Noah Fafita in Arizona. Didn't start Noah Fafita. Probably going to end up regretting that one. But back to USC, LSU. I think it has a chance to be a really, really good game tonight. Obviously, I'm watching that wide receiver room to see who Garrett Nussmeier tends to favor. And on USC, same thing. I've talked a lot about, I think Mekhi Lemon really fits that wide receiver role that tends to break out in the Lincoln Riley offense more than Jacoby Lane. But everybody else here thinks it's going to be Jacoby Lane. So, who's going to be that guy? I think, obviously, we're going to get a lot of answers tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then, obviously, we have the Monday night game, Boston College, Florida State, which I think could be a really fun game as well. So, really looking forward to those two. Excited to see what happens. And Michael Leonard, Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt was the guy who also transferred in. But again, as I mentioned, Quali Conley followed their head coach, whose name's escaping me at the moment, but from San Jose. And in my opinion, he looked like the better running back. He's the guy that I've been on. I think both are probably available. Merritt might not be because I know a lot of people believed he'd be the starting running back. He did get 5 more carries, but again, Quali Conley had better yards per average. In my opinion, looked more explosive, and he had the 3 receptions as well in that one. I just think he's a guy who's going to be using that offense differently than Merritt. I would personally rather roster Quali Conley over Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, but to each their own. I've been wrong a lot. So don't necessarily think that I'm going to be right there. But guys, again, thank you so much for all you who jumped in here. Yeah, Loveland had a great touchdown. Loveland looks like he's back with Warren Davis at quarterback. We'll be back again probably Wednesday. I don't know that we'll react to the USC Boston College game. Maybe if Felix and myself have some time tomorrow with it being Labor Day and having a day off, we can jump on and react. Maybe I'll just do it by myself. We'll see, because I will only get a chance to watch a little bit of that game. I do have a soccer game tonight, so I'll be able to watch half of it. Won't be able to watch the other half till tomorrow morning. So we'll see what happens there. But thank you guys so much. I hope you guys enjoyed week 1 of the college football. It was so good to be back. I had 8 games up, 2 different TVs. I loved it. College football's here. We are set from now till January 25th, I believe, is the day, the national championship game of just college football all Saturday long. Cannot wait. Thank you guys so much. We'll talk to you guys again soon.